Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we are moving on with our outline and we are looking at how we're going to construct our characters. We're going to start with the two main characters, which is our vampire main character and our shapeshifter main character that are going to be fighting each other and Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we're moving on with our outline. We are working on our characters today, so we're going to start with our two main characters, which are our shapeshifter main character and our vampire main character. And yes, they will both be men, and today I'm going to explain to you why that is. There is a very prevalent convention right now in the publishing world that all the main characters have to be these strong, resilient females, and I disagree with that, and I'm going to explain to you today why I do things differently. There is a reason why all of the heroes of classical antiquity and the literary tradition are usually males. And it's not because of any kind of patriarchal reason or anything like that. The reason is that it's embedded in our cultural subconscious that the male is a neutral, archetypal figure that represents all of humanity. And we see this reflected in multiple languages across the world throughout history, where the male pronoun also doubles as the neutral pronoun. This goes back to the earliest examples of human language. It's not something that anybody just made up in the last couple hundred years. This is embedded in human psychology at the subconscious level. And you can see this in the book of Genesis, where the Hebrew word Adam, which is translated as the name Adam, actually means a human being or a person. It can be either gender. And in the Jewish tradition, Adam did not have gender until God created Eve. So the person, the archetypal figure of a human being, is gender neutral. And it is embedded in our cultural psychology that when we have a male character in any kind of hero's journey narrative, if that character is male, we automatically consider that character to be a gender-neutral archetype for whatever message the story is giving us. And we can see this countless examples. And I'm going to give you some to prove what I'm telling you. I'm not saying this is right, I'm not saying it's good. You don't have to agree with it. This is just the way it is. It's the way our psychology has been built for thousands of years, maybe even millions of years. And it's not something that we can just turn off. So the first example we're going to look at is the book of Jonah. The book of Jonah from the Bible tells the story that Jonah was called by God to travel to a certain city and to preach to the citizens and to call on them to repent and turn back to God. And Jonah did not want to do that, and he literally ran away, ran off in the opposite direction, got in a boat and sailed away to get away from that mission. And God called a tempest to sink the boat, and the crew freaked out and were throwing things overboard to try to lighten the load, and they were all upset because they realized that God had turned against them and that someone here has done something to anger God, is going to sink the ship, and we're all going to die. And Jonah said, "It's me. I'm the one who has turned against God. Throw me overboard." And they did. And he got swallowed by a giant fish. And while he was in the belly of the whale, he repented and called on God for forgiveness and promised to do better and to follow through with the mission that he'd been given. And the whale spat him up on dry land, and he traveled to the city and carried out this mission. That is a very well-known story, and it is an allegory for just about any kind of human difficulty or suffering. Everyone who has ever been in any kind of difficulty can relate to the story of Jonah and the whale, and the feeling of being in the belly of the whale in overwhelming circumstances that you don't know how to cope with. And the reason that story is so universal is because everyone can relate to it. The fact that it has a male protagonist, not only does it not stop everyone from relating to it, it actually allows it to happen. And when stories have a female protagonist, it's not the case. Normally what happens is we automatically, subconsciously assign the story as a female-focused story. And I'm going to prove this to you with more examples. But nobody reads the book of Jonah and thinks this only applies to men. There's not a woman alive on the planet that reads the book of Jonah and thinks this doesn't apply to me because the main character is a man. That just doesn't happen. We all recognize that this character is a foil for all of humanity. And the entire story is an allegory for the difficulties that we face as human beings, regardless of who we are, what gender we are, whatever you identify as. If you think that Jonah is a white man, doesn't change it. Doesn't change the fact that everybody can identify with that story and that it applies to all of us whenever we get into difficulty, because we've all felt that way. And if we look at another Bible story, which is the book of Ruth. Ruth lived in another country. She had a husband. She had 2 grown sons who were both married, and her sons married women from this other country. And Ruth's husband died, and both of her sons died. And she decided that she was going to move back to her home country and be with her own people. And she told her daughters-in-law, you stay here, go back to your own families, we'll part as friends. And one of them did that, and the other one said, no, I'm going with you. We're going to stay together. And so they did. They traveled back to Ruth's home country, and the story goes that she was gleaning behind the reapers to get food for her and her daughter-in-law, and was seen by Boaz, who was the big landowner in the area, and he took an interest in her, and they eventually got married and started a family that eventually gave rise to the House of David, which is the House of Kings in the Jewish tradition, and supposedly also an ancestor of Jesus. That story is specifically a female story. You don't read the book of Ruth thinking this is a universal allegory for all human experience. That just is not what it means. It's not what it's about. And we can see this in modern examples. If you look at the Hunger Games or Divergent or any of the other modern super hits with female protagonists, it's much more difficult for any random person to see that main character as an archetype for all humanity, what they're going through, because they're female. If you compare those series to a movie like The Matrix is an allegory for all human experience. Neo is a foil for every individual interacting with technology. That's the whole point of the movie. And the reason why that happens, why he is able to be this neutral canvas that all of us can project ourselves onto, is because he's male. It would not be possible to do that with a female character. I'm not saying this is good. I'm not saying anybody has to agree with it. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that this is embedded in our cultural psychology. And the other examples that I want to call on from the modern pop culture, the first one is Limitless, which is about a man who takes a drug which allows him to access and utilize the maximum percentage of his brain capacity. And that movie is an allegory for self-improvement. He goes through all of these self-improvement processes that we all go through with his fitness, with his appearance, with his cleaning up his house, learning, writing books. He does all of these things. In the movie, they're sped up, so it happens at a super fast pace. But that movie is an allegory for all of us trying to improve ourselves in all the different departments of our life. If you compare that movie to the movie Lucy, which is exactly the same thing, she's a drug mule and she's carrying a drug that causes her, it breaks, and she gets dosed with this drug, and it activates 100% of her brain power. And you might think that that movie is also an allegory for self-improvement, but if you think about how different Limitless would have been if Lucy had been the main character, it would not be seen as universal to the same degree. And when I first started on my publishing journey, I made the mistake of falling into this convention of thinking that the main character always needs to be female. I did this with the Pride Land series, and it was a huge mistake. In that series, the main female character, she's involved with two different men. She has reason to mistrust them both, and neither of them is seen as truly a protagonist or an ally of hers. It's her against both of them. And that was a mistake. If I had to do it over again, I would have done with the first series what I did with the second series, which is I would have made it a team thing with multiple protagonists and one main male admirable lead character. A possibly alternating point of view between a male and a female, but the main male lead would be admirable, he would be strong, he would be a leader, and he would be basically responsible for getting everybody out of that situation. He would not be an antagonist to a female protagonist. That was a mistake. And you can see this in some of my other books. For example, in Battalion 1, where the main character is a man, and he is an archetype, again, for the interaction between humans and technology. And he is a neutral foil for everybody, male and female. Any female walking the earth right now would be able to relate to his situation. And it would not be the same if it was a female character. So this outline that we're doing right now, the two main leads are going to be men. There will be other female characters involved, and we'll talk about that in the next video. So I hope all of that made sense. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.